Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I'm not selling anything. I'm not talking for any sponsor. I'm just saying if you are alive and you've been looking around, you just might want to lay in a little extra supplies each time you go to the grocery store. It's been about 12 times now I've gone to the grocery store and been told there's a limited supply of water. Now, if you live in a part of the country where it's 110 degrees, you're going to want water. And we can't really drink the stuff coming out of the faucet because we're constantly being told we're under a boil watch or whatever. So, next time you go to the grocery store, don't say, okay, I just need a case of water. Get two. Now, lay in a few extra supplies for that day when all of a sudden the city announces, we're sorry, there's no water, there's no food, there's no this, there's no that. I'm not talking about end of the world survival. I'm just talking about a couple of extra bottles of water, maybe a couple of cans of food, so you don't go hungry or thirsty. Canada has managed to pull ahead of both Australia and New Zealand. Iceland is bringing up the rear now. Out of nowhere, Austria has taken the lead by a substantial amount. I will be at the Wonderland UFO Festival August 27th from 10 a.m. until they chase me out of the building. I'll be selling some of my books, so if you're in the area around San Antonio, or you don't mind driving a long way, drop by and say hi. If you have a good or even a bad story for my next book, let me know. I'll try and put it in. It's in 2 weeks, August 27th at the Wonderland UFO Festival, San Antonio, which is actually in Balcones Heights. It's free and the air conditioning will be on. Yes, it's inside a shopping mall, but hey, take what you can get. David Subith sent me an article about some bizarre underwater tracks. Once I read what was out there, I decided to see what other weirdness is going on under the waves. There are holes on the ocean floor. The scientists don't know why. During a mapping expedition off the coast of Portugal in July, a line of holes was caught on camera. The ROV being used for the mapping was sent in for a closer look. They looked like footprints walking along the seabed. An even closer examination showed they looked more like holes, but they were in a line. This brings up the question, if something were in the water, wouldn't it be far easier to swim rather than walk? Well, there are some fish out there that say no, but we'll get to them in a bit. Walking through the water would require a lot of energy as well as it would be slower. Swimming would be a lot easier and a lot faster. But like I said, there are some fish out there that say something to the other extreme. About a week later, there were 4 more sightings on the Azores Plateau, which is an underwater terrain where 3 tectonic plates meet. Those holes were about a mile deep and about 300 miles from the site of the expedition's initial discovery. Once the line of small holes had been looked at and wondered over, the researchers looked through the records of ocean floor anomalies. They discovered that 18 years earlier, a similar line of holes or footprints had been found while exploring the mid Atlantic ridge. Scientists don't know what these holes are, but they have encountered similar markings before and they consider them to be Lebensspuren. That's German for life traces, footprints, referring to impressions in sediment that would be the work of living organisms. The scientists had no idea what could be walking around on the bottom of the ocean. The holes were about 4 to 5 inches apart, and they ran for about a 6-foot line. One theory is there's some unknown creature living on the bottom of the ocean that pushes sand up from its burrow, creating these lines. The pressure at a mile down is over a ton per square inch. You wouldn't think anything could live under that much pressure, but there are all kinds of living things down there. The boys in the white lab coats tried using a suction device to scoop up the sand at the end of one of these lines, but once at the surface, all they had was sand. There was no living organism to be found. Speaking of something walking on the bottom, great white sharks hunt the deep. Walking sharks are content to scuttle in the shallows. They've been walking, or something close to it, for millions of years. Walking sharks could be the most recently evolved shark on the planet. According to findings published in Marine and Freshwater Research, shark scientists spent years sampling the DNA of the only known walking shark species to estimate when they evolved. They found 4 new species while they were working on it. Walking sharks are also called epaulet sharks for their spots that resemble military decor, and they walk on their muscular fins so they can forage for small fish along the shallow reefs and the seagrass. It's a behavior particularly driven by changing sea levels and shifting landscapes, which ultimately influenced where most of the 9 known species settled: eastern Indonesia and the neighboring islands, New Guinea, and parts of Australia. Based on differences in shark DNA, scientists created estimated evolutionary timelines. They found walking sharks started to split off from their relatives around 9 million years ago. Speaking of changing sea levels, if the oceans were actually rising, why are so many billionaires building huge mansions along the coast? I don't think they're buying into the whole thing that they're trying to pass on to us. That's just my opinion. Near the town of Lake Mills, Wisconsin, is a small lake called Rock Lake. If you've never been to Wisconsin, the place is full of lakes. I think they call it the land of 10,000 lakes. Beautiful countryside. I was there for a while. My brother worked up there at a prison. Can't remember which one. Rochester, Rockfield, something. Anyway, he worked at the prison there, and he did a lot of boating when he could. The biggest trouble with living in Wisconsin is it gets cold in the wintertime. I'm just not into cold. Never, not anymore. It makes parts of my body hurt, like all of it. The local Indians, the Ho-Chunk tribe, which my nephew is a member of, tell about long ago a civilization lived where the lake is today. Back in the 1800s, when settlers began moving in, they were told about a village of rock teepees sitting on the bottom of the lake. Long ago, people from far away built huge stone structures. These folks had some form of energy that they were drawing up from the ground. 1867, a creature was seen in the lake that would become known as the Rock Lake Monster. After a while, the name was shortened to just Rocky. A man by the name of Harbeck said he saw a large lizard swimming in the lake. Later on, he saw the same creature on the shore. It was laying in the reeds, and it hissed at him when he walked up to it. The creature turned and waddled back into the water. Almost sounds like an alligator, but you don't have alligators in Wisconsin. Other witnesses at the time reported seeing a large, thick creature that resembled a serpent swimming under the surface of the water. The mystery animal was known to occasionally break the surface and hiss aggressively at onlookers who were close to the shoreline. Near the end of 1870s, a man by the name of R. Hassman encountered the beast as it was floating on the surface close to the shore. Hassman said he was walking the shoreline when he spotted what he thought was a log in the water. As he got closer, he could see the log was actually a living thing. The witness tried poking Rocky with a sharpened stick. The creature thrashed about and then shot to the middle of the lake. 1882, Ed Mackenzie and D. Seibert challenged one another to a race across the lake in their rowboats. First one across wins. As the men raced towards the other side, one of them noticed what appeared to be a large trunk of a tree floating across the surface of their path. The two men slowed their speed but continued to row towards what they thought was nothing more than a log. Suddenly, a large neck and a head rose up nearly 3 feet out of the water. Opening its mouth wide, it hissed at them. The monster dove back down into the murky, silt-filled water, but it didn't leave the area. The men discovered they were alone in the middle of the lake with an enormous monster swimming around right under them. The creature began to surface right next to Mackenzie's boat. The terrified man began to yell as loud as he could, hoping that the folks on the shoreline would be able to do something to help out. Seibert began swinging his oar and hitting the creature with it, trying to drive it back below the surface. John Lund heard the shouts for help, and he saw what was happening in the middle of the lake. He gathered a group of men who were nearby, and they jumped into a boat and began making their way out to the two men. As the group got closer, a man named Wilson raised his shotgun and took aim at the creature. Rocky turned its head towards this third boat, showed his teeth, and then let out with this loud hiss. After this, he dove back into the depths of Rock Lake. Wilson kept his gun pointed towards the water, waiting for Rocky's return, but the creature never resurfaced. Realizing it would be in their best interests to vacate the lake immediately, the 3 rowboats quickly made their way back to shore. The men scanned the water for any signs of the beast, but Rocky would not be seen for some time after this. Sightings of Rocky became few and far between. Many believe he simply moved to another lake. A few miles away from Rock Lake is Red Cedar Lake. Many people believe it is fed by Rock Lake through an underground stream. 1890, a farmer around Red Cedar began to report sightings of a serpentine-like beast swimming around the lake. A local pig farmer reported a creature resembling a 20-foot serpent grabbed one of his hogs off the shoreline and pulled it back under the water. people realized that Rocky had found a new home with an abundant food source. The monster was said to have gone on a rampage along the shores of Red Cedar Lake and snatched up any livestock that was close enough to grab. The partly devoured remains of cattle, sheep, and pigs were often found the next day floating near the surface and washing up on the shore. 1892, a farmer by the name of William Ward reported 5 of his sheep had been snatched by the monster and dragged back into the lake over the course of one night. Rocky's presence soon became such an issue that the local residents closed their buildings and left the area, taking their livestock with them. With no readily available food store around, Rocky must have left the area, or maybe he went back to Rock Lake, because there were no more reports of Rocky being seen in the area. Dr. Fayette Morgan, a local dentist and an early civilian pilot, was the first person to glimpse Rock Lake from above on April 11, 1936. He noticed dark shapes of 2 rectangular structures on the bottom of the lake, right about the center. He made multiple passes and saw their regular proportions and enormous size. He believed that they were more than 100 feet long. Dr. Morgan landed, refueled, and then he ran home and grabbed his camera. He flew immediately to catch the sunken objects on film. The lake's submerged monuments had faded in the late afternoon light, and by the time he got there he could no longer see them. Subsequent and repeated attempts to photograph or even rediscover them from the air failed until 1940, when a local pilot named Armand Vendré and his rear co-pilot observer Elmer Woolen took a flight over the lake. As their single-engine plane banked over the lake's south end at less than 1,000 feet, they could see massive, perfectly centered triangle structure pointing due north underneath them. The pyramid was under about 20 feet of water. Now, there was a pair of black circles next to each that looked as if they were all man-made. Many people thought Rocky the Monster of Rock Lake had died. Almost 50 years passed before a new sighting of Rocky was reported. July 1943, 15-year-old Joseph Davis was fishing on Rock Lake when he noticed there was a wake causing through the water. He stared out at the water, wondering what could be causing it. Suddenly, about 20 feet from his boat, a large body of this unknown creature rose up from below the surface. Joseph watched as the brownish-black creature slowly moved through the water. The large torso at the surface slowly arched forward and then sunk back down beneath the water, never to be seen again. No one has reported seeing the Rock Lake Monster since then. During a drought, the water level decreased substantially. A couple of men in a boat were out on Rock Lake, and they saw the huge stone structures through the murky water. Once back on shore, they talked about what they had seen, and the old-timers made the connection between what these men had seen and what the Indians had been talking about for years. Around the time of the Great Depression, the people living in Lake Mills spread the word about pyramids in the bottom of the lake. They hoped to attract tourists to their town to bring in some much-needed cash. Visitors to the town could only listen to stories and look at hand-drawn sketches of what might be in the lake. It wasn't until the 1940s, when scuba gear came on the market, that folks were able to actually dive down and have a look. Helmet diving had been around for years, but nobody wanted to drag all the equipment out to the small lake in Wisconsin just to look for what might be an unsubstantiated legend. Divers were able to investigate the stone structures. At least 10 structures may be found beneath the surface of Rock Lake. One of the structures was named Lemnatus Pyramid, with a 60-foot base and a 100-foot length. It stands about 18 feet high. The divers said they could see the remains of plaster covering the sides of the pyramid. The length of each of the deltas equal sides was estimated to be about 300 feet. There was a canal running from the pyramid. There was a tiny, narrow, buried island, maybe 1,500 feet long and 400 feet wide. The straight path ran underwater from the southern shore of the pinnacle of the buried delta. A local geologist thought the line was the remnants of a large stone canal that connected Rock Lake to Aztlan, 3 miles away. Aztlan in Wisconsin is a 21-acre archaeological park with a stockade wall that partially encloses what is called the Pyramids of the Sun and the Moon. These are 2 clay temple mounds. The ceremonial center was twice as massive in its heyday in the late 13th century. Then it had 3 circular walls with watchtowers enclosing a triad of pyramidal earthworks topped with wooden shrines. Aztlan belonged to the upper Mississippian culture, which thrived throughout the American Midwest and into the South in its last stages. Commencing approximately 1,100 years AD, while carbon dating experiments indicate its oldest known roots to be in the 3rd century BC. Its population peaked at 20,000 people, who resided on both sides of these walls. They were headed by astronomer priests who correctly aligned their pyramids for the calculation of several astronomical events, such as the winter solstice, moon phases, and Venus's location. Why would they want to know all this? Well, you want to know when it's going to get cold so you can move south. You also want to know when's a good time to plant your crops so they'll grow and you can harvest them before it snows. You want to know the weather, and this was how they told what the weather was going to be. Around the year 1320, the Aztlaners set fire to their city and abandoned it. They retreated to the south, according to the surviving Ho-Chunk oral tradition. Their exodus happened to coincide with the abrupt development of the Aztec state in the Valley of Mexico. According to some folks, the ancient culture that lived in the area purposefully built these structures to harness electromagnetic energy from ley lines that stretched from the Mayan citadel of Tikal through Lake Mills and into Mayville, where they keep finding crop circles. Archaeologists say there are no pyramids in the lake. The locals must be mistaken. The archaeologists don't want to go against their textbooks that were written by folks who lived in the library. You know what they say about a PhD? They all know where the library is. I'll go with what the Ho-Chunks say. If they say there are pyramids under that lake, they should know. They've been there. Strange things happen around Rock Lake for centuries. People see things that may or may not be real. Apparitions. Ice fishermen say they can't start their chainsaws out on the ice. They take their equipment back to shore and everything is fine. The machine fires right up. But they walk back out onto the ice and once again their chainsaws refuse to start. Scuba divers trying to film underwater pyramids can't get their cameras to work. Other divers preparing to dive into the water of the pyramids are overcome with a sense of dread. It is apparent that there is an energy disturbance going on in the area, strong enough to cause mechanical failures as well as affecting the human consciousness. Lake Mills area seems to be a hotbed of strange activity, including the Rock Lake Terror, or Rocky. UFOs have been witnessed going into and coming out of the lake. Phantoms are seen on the shore as well as out on the water, as well as other mysterious phenomena. If you live in Wisconsin, you might want to take a trip out to Rock Lake and have a look. ExxonMobil was laying a pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico when they stumbled upon a mysterious shipwreck. There was no record of a wreck in this area, and so the site was passed on to the U.S. Navy. A Navy research ROV, a vessel called the NR-1, was put in the water and it immediately malfunctioned. It veered out of control, got its tether caught in the ship's propeller. The rover was then slammed up against the side of the ship and it was completely destroyed. There's our tax dollars hard at work. They were finally able to get another ROV into the water, and they were able to pick up a piece of wrecked stern post. As the sub was making its way back to the surface, the arm's hydraulic system shut down, and the artifact slipped out of its grasp and sank back to the bottom. One researcher said, "We spent 2 days looking for that wreck, and we may never find it again." A research was passed to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who also experienced all manner of freak accidents. As soon as their ship left port, they were forced to abort the mission when their propeller was damaged by a piece of floating debris. On a second try, the propeller locked and they had to return yet again. A group of government researchers offered to look for the wreck, only to have their ship almost sink when the prop shaft broke, penetrating the side of the ship and flooding the engine room. During this disaster, their ROV was also smashed by flying debris. The next time an ROV was put in the water to examine the wreck, it experienced a leak in the electronics system and shorted out. To this day, the stubborn wreck in the Gulf of Mexico has been unsuccessfully explored, and the only artifact researchers have managed to procure from it is a single scrap of copper plating. The researchers believe the wreck is an 1800s ship, but that's all they know about it. The mystery wreck is either cursed, or there is something on the bottom of the Gulf that is causing all manner of foul luck. Maybe this unknown object caused the mystery ship to sink in the first place. We don't know at this time because they still haven't been able to go down and look at this wreck. The Devil's Sea, also known as the Pacific Bermuda Triangle and the Dragon's Triangle, is an area of the Pacific Ocean where a number of unusual paranormal events have taken place. The Devil's Sea is an area of the Pacific Ocean near Japan that is said to play host to mysterious forces. Dating back to the age of Kublai Khan and the Mongol Empire of the 13th century, legends describe this area as being notoriously dangerous for seafarers. Some of the supernatural suggestions for why ships seem to disappear at an unusually high rate in the area include alien abductions, portals to other worlds, sea monsters, and secret military operations. As for the secret military doings, they wouldn't explain what had happened hundreds of years ago. That's just a new twist that has been added to an already convoluted story. The Devil's Sea is centered around the Izu Islands. It's about 62 miles from the main island. Strange occurrences in this specific area of the Pacific Ocean date back centuries. While trying to invade Japan in the 1200s, Kublai Khan failed, losing 40,000 sailors in this area, now known as the Devil's Sea. Due to his immense losses, Kublai Khan changed his plans, believing that it was way too dangerous to try invading Japan. Another disappearance occurred August 1945. A Mitsubishi A6M0, a long-range fighter plane, went missing in the area of the Devil's Sea towards the end of World War II. The pilot, Ishiro Kawamoto, managed to relay one final message. He said, "Something is happening in the sky. The sky is opening up," followed by nothing but silence. A research ship called the Cairo Maru was tasked with finding a number of missing fishing vessels as well as military ships. All these vessels had disappeared in the Devil's Sea between 1940 and 1950s. This ship was going out to investigate the Devil's Sea. The ship and its 31-member crew started their investigation in 1951, and they disappeared. The wreck was later found, but the fate of the 31 crew members remains unknown today. After the research vessel vanished, the Japanese government labeled this area of the ocean especially dangerous, and they warned sailors moving through the area to be extremely cautious and to take precautions. John Hutchison said he thinks the Devil's Sea and the Bermuda Triangle are connected by a portal. Both of these bizarre areas are along the same line of latitude. The Kraken is one of the most famous legendary sea monsters on the high seas. The beast is often described as being a gigantic cephalopod-like creature. It resembles an enormous octopus or a giant squid or some other beast with tentacles. In some Scandinavian stories, the Kraken terrorizes ships and sailors, dragging crews to the bottom of the sea. Other Norse sagas and folk tales say the Kraken causes whirlpools that capsize ships. Sometimes kraken are described as huge, smelly beasts which draw fish up to the surface. Kraken sightings have been recorded in the waters near Norway, Greenland, and Iceland for over 800 years. Accounts of this beast are sometimes accompanied by drawings showing the monster to be anywhere from 50 to 200 feet in length. The sheer size and fearsome appearance of the Kraken makes it one of the most terrifying and impressive mythical sea monsters of all times. Just saying it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true. A myth is based on the word mythos, which was simply a story passed on from one person to another. Stories of the Kraken can be traced back as far as 1200 AD. However, other sea monster stories that are not specifically called the Kraken can be traced even farther back. Perhaps this was the same creature, it just hadn't been named yet. One particularly well-known Kraken story comes from an old Norwegian folk tale. In this account, the Kraken was sighted in the Greenland Sea by a group of sailors who all said they saw the exact same thing. According to legend, the Kraken lives in the deepest parts of the ocean. When ships pass by on the surface, the beast will attack and drag entire vessels under the waves. It was believed that the Kraken would then devour the ship, the crew, or maybe both. Kraken attacks were once used to explain the disappearances of ships and crews on long sea voyages. These monsters were also thought to be the cause of small fishing boats disappearing, bad ocean smells, surges of fish, and more. The kraken can be traced back to various ancient Norwegian texts. In the oldest Nordic account of the kraken, Orvar Odar and his son came into contact with two such beasts while crossing deep waters off the coast of Norway. They saw these beasts clearly and were terrified by their size and fearsome appearance. When they returned home, they reported what they'd experienced to anyone who would listen. The story of Ovar Odar was written down in the historic Konungs, an educational Norwegian text. I don't speak Norwegian. SKUGGSJA with a little slash above it. I know I have a few listeners in Norway. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that because I might say something nasty. It's funny how you can have two words that are spelled similar, are pronounced completely differently, and mean drastically different things. Anyway, these beasts were first called kraken sometime around this time. Other sightings of similar kraken-like beasts followed and were written down as well. Thus, the legend was born. The word kraken comes from the Norwegian word krake, which is closely related to the German word for octopus. Since the late 18th century, these monsters have been depicted in many ways. The beast is usually drawn or painted as a large octopus-like creature, sometimes with a shell covering its body. In early folklore, kraken were drawn with appendages similar to crabs. These early accounts described the beast with spindly spines and what resembled body armor. Other kraken were described as whale-like monsters. Still others were like enormous squid with giant teeth, shelled backs, and spiked appendages. Sailors were terrified of the kraken due to its massive size. The monster was much bigger than most boats of the time. Even the largest Norse ships were thought to be no match for this beast. It is said that one could take hold of a ship and drag it to the bottom with ease in less than a minute. Some kraken stories described monsters up to 1.5 miles long. Others said that the kraken was the length of 10 ships, bow to stern. If a kraken were about to attack a ship, sailors said that the signs would foretell the coming calamity. If fish suddenly began to surge to the surface and leap out of the water, the sailors believed that the kraken was likely on its way. Gurgling bubbles or an abundance of jellyfish would also sometimes be considered signs of a nearby kraken. Other signs of this monster were large waves, bad weather, schools of fish fleeing from the area, or all of the above at once. Even though these signs were said to precede the kraken, ships would not have enough time to escape. The speed and size of the kraken made it a difficult beast to evade. Some bones have been found, suggest some kind of kraken may once have actually existed. And the kraken may still be around today. Over 80% of the Earth's oceans have yet to be mapped. Since the world is 70% water, makes for a lot of places for a giant sea creature to hide. Ichthyosaur bones have been discovered in strange patterns on the ocean floor and fossil records. These bones look like gigantic octopus kills. When an octopus kills its prey, it discards the body around where it lives, like a little graveyard around its cave. Since the ichthyosaur grew to be 66 feet long, an octopus would have to have been bigger to hunt and eat one. Scientists even found one ichthyosaur skeleton with a rib cage cracked from constriction. It was as if a large tentacle had been wrapped around the ichthyosaur, crushing it as it drug it under. Unlike many mythical creatures, the kraken is not known for possessing any magical powers. It can't fly, it doesn't shoot lightning bolts from its eyes, and it can't control the weather. This beast doesn't have any supernatural powers at all. It does possess an aggressive nature, and its sheer size makes it something to avoid at all costs. Even today, the kraken is famous in popular culture. The monster is mentioned in books, poems, movies, television shows, and more. Since there are gigantic squid and octopi in the ocean, the kraken is a mythological creature that may not be a myth. Back when I was in school, we visited the Field Museum in Chicago. This was back when you could still walk around that town without getting shot, before gun control laws were passed and the violence escalated. There was a fiberglass representation of a giant squid mounted on the wall. I talked about the giant squid once I was back in class, and I was told I was stupid for such nonsense. And they wondered why I hated school. In 1752, a history of Norway was written. In this historical account, a monster described as the kraken is listed as the most terrifying sea monster in the entire world. The earliest record of the kraken has lots of details about size, shape, and even its peculiar smell. Tales with notes about starfish-type protuberances on the kraken can be found from scholars describing its long, pointy arms. Another legend has it that the kraken attacked a ship, but the sailors managed to fight it off. When the beast dove back into the sea, it created a whirlpool so large it capsized the vessel. The men were barely able to escape with their lives. It is said that the earliest sailors who encountered the kraken would mistaken this gigantic creature as being an island. There are a few accounts of the kraken being helpful to fishermen. Early Norwegian fishermen would seek out the kraken to fish near it. This was because the scent and the presence of the kraken drew fish to the surface. Despite the danger, fishing near the kraken could lead to a better catch. Fishermen have a reputation for doing dangerous things in order to catch their sea creatures. Just look at that show, Deadliest Catch. I watch the show once in a while, but as far as wanting to do that for a living, I say nope. Not for me. I don't even eat seafood. In the history of our planet, there are few predators that even existed that were as terrifying or as powerful as the Carcharodon Megalodon, also simply called the Megalodon or the Meg. This was an enormous shark about 60 feet or more long, possessing the strongest bite of any predator that ever lived. It was enough to bite through an automobile. How scientists know this, I'm not really sure, but that's what they say. The Megalodon was one of the most fearsome creatures our planet has ever seen, terrorizing the sea during the Cenozoic era, approximately 23 to 2.6 million years ago. It was a potential killing machine larger than a bus, made up of muscle, mouth, and jagged teeth that were up to 8 inches long, with which it used to tear through prey just in one bite. I try to imagine a shark as big as a Greyhound bus. Hmm, that's a big shark. One can only imagine what a horrific, awe-inspiring thing the sight of a 60-foot-long shark lurching up from the depths would have been. I read the book, The Meg, and I saw the movie. The book was better, but the movie had some really good special effects. And the acting wasn't bad either. But still, if you're a reader, you're going to say the book was better, usually. Except The Towering Inferno. That book's horrible. Come to think of it, so was Die Hard. The book Die Hard was nothing like the movie. Anyway, maybe the title was the same, but that was about it. I'm getting off subject again. In 2014, I watched that mockumentary on the Discovery Channel that they tried to pass off as being found footage. Megalodon, the monster shark that lives. That was the last time I ever watched Shark Week. Had the video footage been real, and they'd done a proper job of portraying it, the world would have applauded them. They were shooting for ratings, and they shot themselves in the foot. The Discover Channel is supposed to be scientific, not just a bunch of Hollywood dweebs trying to make a buck. Nowadays, it's all some celebrity being passed off as a shark person. Oh, look, there's so-and-so. He's going to jump in a shark tank. Well, I'm not into so-and-so, and I'm not going to watch Shark Week. Not until they get back to being a scientific show. I'm getting off the subject, aren't I? Saying the Discover Channel screwed up, I'm not saying the Meg can't still be out there. Somewhere. Looking for its next meal. Could a giant shark be swimming around under the waves? The world is 70% water. We can only go to the bottom in very expensive subs. The Challenger Deep is becoming the new Mount Everest. Folks with too much money are paying huge sums to dive down 10,994 feet so they can say they were there. I guess they get a t-shirt and a selfie, and that's it. You can tell people, I've been to the Challenger Deep. That's it. More people have walked on the moon than have been to the bottom of the ocean, but it is becoming quite the thing. The pressure in the Challenger Deep is over 1,000 times higher than it is on land. There just might be something down there looking for an easy meal. Maybe that's how all those celebrities are going to disappear. A Greenland shark have been recorded diving down to over 7,000 feet. How about 10,000? We don't know. There's a lot we don't know about the Greenland shark, so maybe the Meg could also be down there. The funny thing about the Greenland shark, forever they said that they're not a danger to humans. Oh no, that's just a giant shark with a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth, but they don't eat people. That was the accepted theory. Jeremy Wade even jumped in the water with a Greenland shark and swam around next to it for a bit because he was listening to the boys in the white lab coat. Later, they've discovered that Greenland shark actually will eat people. They just do it in a very devious way. They'll swim alongside a diver and look at him and then swim away. And then they circle around and they come sneaking up from behind, maybe with bad intentions. We don't know how many divers may disappear each year because nobody's talking about that. If the Greenland shark can dive that deep, why not something like the Megalodon? Boys in the white lab coats say, no way. Well, I don't listen to the boys in the white lab coats. Being a giant fish, they don't have to come up for air. Sharks don't have a swim bladder, so when they die, they sink. A dead Megalodon is not going to wash up on a beach somewhere. In 1918, Australian naturalist David Steed was visiting Port Stephens, Australia, and he came across some terrified local crayfish fishermen who refused to venture out in their regular deep water fishing grounds near Broughton Island. When asked as to what was upsetting them, they related an interesting tale. The fishermen said they'd been out fishing the deep waters, collecting their crayfish pots, when an immense shark, 115 feet long, swooped in and devoured a number of their crayfish pots, mooring lines and all. This giant shark destroyed their equipment, eating their catch. The terrified fishermen reported that this massive shark was unlike anything they'd ever seen before. And these were not rookies. These were not greenhorns. These men had years of experience. They said this shark was pure white. The great white is actually gray. This shark was white. The giant shark apparently passed by several times in a threatening manner, causing the water to boil over the large swath as it passed. These experienced seamen were adamant that this creature was not a whale. They knew what sharks looked like. They said that this was a giant shark. 2003 headlines were made by a story about a 9-foot-long great white shark that inexplicably was attacked by some mysterious super predator. The shark had been tagged with a black box which measured and recorded the entire incident. When the black box was found washed up on shore in the aftermath of the mystery attack, the data proved to be a conundrum for the experts. According to the data, the shark had been suddenly and rapidly dragged down to 2,000 feet, but the temperature didn't go down. It remained steady, and then it began to rise to the consistency of the inside of a large animal. Okay. The temperature was considered too low to be a killer whale because they're mammals, and it was too high to be another shark, unless it was a very, very large shark. How big would a shark need to be to get a 7-foot shark inside its mouth? It wouldn't have to get the whole shark in there. Still, a shark would need to be really big and aggressive to bite the other shark in half. The story took the media by storm and captured the imagination of the public. What sort of creature could have so decisively devoured a great white, the most feared known shark? And what did this mysterious data mean? The puzzle steadily generated headlines proclaiming that the shark had been attacked by a super predator, a sea monster, or the Megalodon. A speculation continues that perhaps it was the long thought to be extinct Megalodon making an appearance to snatch the great white. The answer to what exactly killed the shark has not been answered and may never be. So it's likely the Megalodon theory will continue to be passed around. Whatever it was at least large enough to cause a lot of alarm. Another possible Megalodon attack was reported around 50 miles north of Vancouver, British Columbia in 2013. In this case, a massive shark was seen to drag the carcass of a sperm whale underwater after killing it. Witnesses said they saw the enormous tail fin of a monster shark break the water's surface, after which the whale carcass was pulled under with breathtaking force. One long-term local resident explained in the Sage News, "I have lived on the coast for most of my life. I have never seen a shark's tail fin that large. It must have been the width of my fishing trawler. About an hour after the attack, the carcass of the whale washed up on shore and displayed evidence of having been ravaged by something very aggressive and very large. One marine biologist said that it appeared as if the entire lower third of the animal had been dissected with one bite. Yikes. And that the large tooth, measuring 7.5 inches, was found embedded in the dead whale's spine. According to the news report, it was estimated from the size of the tooth and the bite radius that whatever had attacked the whale had been far larger than any known species of great white, with some estimates saying the beast may have been 100 feet long, with a bite radius 7 to 8 feet. In response to rampant speculation that the culprit was a surviving megalodon, marine biologists stated, "I can't say that the whale was attacked by a megalodon, but whatever attacked and killed that beast must have paleontologists rather excited." There have been numerous reports of megalodons attacking and maiming whales, and there have been various photos put forth on the internet supposedly offering proof of this. One such account is that of a whale that had its entire tail gnawed off in Hawaii in 2009. This propensity for attacking whales would actually fit in well with what is known of the behavior of the megalodon, as it had been discovered in recent years that the predator often preferred whales over other large sea creatures. Fossilized evidence in the form of ancient whale carcasses have been found that showed the characteristic marks of a very large shark tooth. In 1990, it was ascertained by paleontologist Dr. Brenton Kent that the megalodon was far more aggressive in its attack style than previously thought. Examining the remains of a fossilized baleen whale that had been killed by a megalodon, it was also found that the megalodon was fond of targeting hard, bony areas of its prey, which it would crush with its powerful jaws, rather than going after the soft underbellies that are preferred by the great white. The idea of a megalodon swimming around out there in one or several of our oceans isn't all that unbelievable. I've read articles dealing with sea monster sightings where the question was raised, why are most sea monster stories from the past? Back in the days of sailing ships being the only way to travel, there were men standing along the rails and high up in the masts watching for anything of danger, from reefs and rocks to pirate ships. Knowing your inattention might lead to your death, the lookouts watched the water around them, and on occasion they would see weird creatures. Today, with modern ships, it's not unheard of for the entire crew to be asleep as the ship cruises along across the ocean. A friend of mine who did a lot of sailing carried a box of dynamite. If a huge ship was getting too close, he'd light half a stick and throw it over the side. Explosions tended to get immediate attention from anyone in a cargo ship. Don't ask me where he got the dynamite. This was 50 years ago. The oceans are vast and unknown things are constantly being found. Scientists have identified 2 new species of shark that live in the depths of the West Indies Ocean. The new species are 6-gilled saw sharks, which have distinctive snouts filled with teeth and catfish-like whiskers or feelers that help them detect prey. One of these sharks was discovered when it was caught by fishermen in Zanzibar, while the snout of the other species was found in Madagascar. 2 sharks that have been swimming around the ocean for hundreds, more likely thousands of years, and it wasn't until this year that anybody got to look at one? If they can do it, why can't the Megalodon? The weirdest thing to be found under the waves has to be the octopus. Octopi have one centralized brain, and then they have 8 other brains, one for each of its arms. If an octopus loses an arm, it will grow back. In terms of brain to body ratio, the octopus has the largest ratio of any invertebrate. They can change their color. They can blend into the surrounding landscape, and they can make their skin look smooth or rough. It's really bizarre to watch a octopus do this. This intelligence goes far beyond simply moving through mazes or opening jars. Octopi are some of the only invertebrates to use tools. They can weld external weapons, such as the way the blanket octopus carries tentacles from the Portuguese man of war. If a predator comes too close, they'll attack the predator with these poisonous tentacles. They hunt in collaboration with other species. The octopus will sometimes get fish to attack other fish, and then they'll chase those fish away so they can clean up and eat what's left. Not only are they smart, they've got personalities, and they exhibit eerily human traits. Octopi are often mischievous, such as there's an octopus at an aquarium that likes to climb out of its tank and then sit there and stare at people as they stand there and stare back. Don't touch the thing, it might latch onto you and not let go. But this octopus does come up out of its tank and sit there and stare at people. It only does this when there are people around. The rest of the time, it stays in its water. There was an octopus named Inky that escaped from the National Aquarium of New Zealand in the middle of the night. He opened his own tank and then slipped out through a drain in the floor that led to the ocean. They didn't know where he'd gone until they discovered that the cover on the drain had been removed. Other octopi have been reported spitting jets of water in order to short out aquarium lights so they could be in the dark. Sometimes in the middle of the night, octopi will go from one tank to another, eat the fish in the other tank, and then slip back into their own. The octopi have 33,000 coded genes. Humans have about 20,000. Despite its complexity, octopi DNA has not changed all that much over the years. A DNA is what instructs life to happen. RNA is what receives these messages and then makes things happen. Octopi can bypass the need for genetic mutations and consistently give their RNA new instructions to alter their physiology pretty much immediately. In some creatures on Earth was alien, I would say the octopi were from some other galaxy. Those folks out there who eat these sea creatures, you might want to reconsider this if UFOs start showing up. These might be relatives of your last dinner. Like I said, swing by the Wonderland UFO Festival August 27th at 10 a.m. Say hi if you see me. Buy a book or two. Christmas is coming up fast. It's only a couple of months away. You don't want to be that guy running around on December 24th looking for gifts. And remember, books are easy to wrap. They don't require any batteries. If you drop them, they don't break. And if the person doesn't like it, he can just rewrap it and give it to somebody else. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, pass it on to others. Tell them what they're missing. If you'd like to contact me, I can be reached at strangethings@arkanasa.com. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? this same murder three. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.